You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph. It is Wednesday, December 18th. It's almost Christmas. Rob, it's been a while since I've seen you. We didn't do a show last week because the game being on Thursday, but glad to have you. How are you?
Yeah, sure. Now that you didn't ditch me for Kyle Posey, that's cool.
What? We do our preview shows every Friday. Moved it up on a Wednesday because the game was on Thursday. You know, I do enjoy Thursday games because then I just take the weekend off. You get to enjoy the rest of the NFL and you're not disappointed on a Sunday. So that's always nice. But Rob, a lot has changed with this team. It feels like with every week we get a new version of this team, a new disappointment. And so, I mean, the latest was this loss to the Rams. But I think now we're at this point where we're sort of wanting to look ahead at 2025. You know, 3 games left in the season. Obviously, this team has a lot of decisions that they have to make on a number of different things. Free agency, coaches. I mean, so let's start off first with what Nick Bosa had to say about what he kind of wishes. And it seems like as far as the defense, he wants to keep the gang back together. He said, quote, "We have the right people in terms of coaches and players. We have the right guys. I think Nick Sorensen has done a great job, honestly. I think he's gotten better. I think D'Amico got better as he went too. I think it'll be a very similar defense, and hopefully Dre helps and will be fresh and ready to rock," end quote. Rob, the defense has looked better the last couple of weeks. I mean, it's hard not to notice that and think, well, maybe if it wasn't for injuries, this is what they could have looked like all season.
I have so many questions on this. First of all, the whole thing with the 49ers this year, right, was we got to get back to running our system, to doing our whatever it is we do, right? 49ers defense. So why is it that it takes all this time throughout the year for them to start running it? Like, why are we in week 15, 16? It's like, yeah, now the defense is really coming together. It's like, isn't this the same stuff you guys have been running for years? Why weren't you able to hit the ground running here? So I don't know about that. And then the other thing, Steph, streets are saying it may not be Nick Sorensen calling the defense the last 2 weeks. The streets are saying maybe Brandon Staley was the one that was doing the heavy lifting when it comes to the defensive game planning and the play calling and all that stuff. Now, I can't confirm or deny that, but look, the streets are going to say what they're going to say.
Well, don't you remember last season when everyone wanted Steve Wilkes fired? You know, they were blaming him for, you know, the defense or this team going down 17 to the Lions in that playoff game. And people were like saying that Kyle Shanahan had a hand in the defensive game plan for the Super Bowl. I don't know if that was really ever confirmed, but it's kind of the same thing. It's like, I think we've seen enough of the one version of the defense this season that we're like, when we see a change or something positive, we're like, that can't be because of that one coach, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, really, no one's ever asked Kyle, by the way, like, how much were you involved in the game plan? That's why we don't really know. And then the other thing to keep in mind is also, like, Nick Sorensen was nobody's first choice to be the defensive coordinator this year. They wanted Steve Spagnuolo, then they wanted Belichick, then they wanted Jeff Ulbrich. And Jeff Ulbrich is probably going to be available after the year once the Jets fire him, because he's not going to be there, you would think. And you would think he's not going to stick around on their coaching staff once the new regime gets in there. So the Niners may go after the guy that they actually wanted all along in Jeff Ulbrich.
I think that's definitely a possibility. You know, obviously Robert Saleh has been thrown in the mix too. He's a free agent as a coach as well. I know he's been helping the Packers out more as a consultant, but I imagine, you know, after the season ends, he's going to have some suitors. So it'll be interesting if the 49ers are in the mix. Now, you know, obviously last season, the 49ers had no problem making Steve Wilkes, I don't want to say the scapegoat, but, you know, some people use that term. I won't in this show, but I'll just say, like, they had no problem cutting ties with Steve Wilkes after a bad season. And I saw an interesting perspective on this that, you know, someone said that the offense was really good last season. This season, not so much. So if you fire Nick Sorensen, it would be hard to do that when the offense has been, let's face it, like worse. Like I think the offense has been worse than the defense at times this season, and certainly in the last couple of games, I think.
They've been more disappointing, that's for sure. Like I expected the defense to fall off a little bit. They've had a really good defense. You've got the numbers on the screen right there. They've had a really good defense for a long time. Teams do not keep really good elite defenses together for half a decade. It's just not done in the history of the NFL. Go back and look, especially it's now the free agency is here. The Niners did that. So I expected some fall off defensively this year, but I thought the offense was going to be good enough to carry them and to pick them up and to be the unit that closes out games. And they just haven't been. And I know they've had injuries, but, Jerry Rice was just on 95-7 the game. And it's like, you know what? Like everybody had his injuries. You can't just throw your hands up and say, well, if we had all our guys, nobody has all their guys.
Look at the Lions.
The Lions, I know most of their injuries are on defense, but not all. And it's like, you got to find a way to get it done. Your plan can't be, well, everyone just has to stay healthy for every game. That's not a plan. And so your offense is supposed to be the unit that's good enough to withstand that. And it wasn't this year.
Now, we do have a live poll in the chat of my channel. So if you're watching from my channel, Steph49K, I do have a poll there that asks, should the 49ers keep Nick Sorensen as defensive coordinator in 2025? Give your guys' answer there or in the live chat. I'm very curious to know what you think. We'll check in on that after, we wrapped up our topics here. But if I had to make a case for Nick Sorensen, I think it would be the fact that Nick Sorensen's personnel has been so much worse than anything DeMeco Ryans had, even worse than what Steve Wilkes had just a season ago, right? So I think that's the reason I would give him the benefit of the doubt. I agree with you, Rob. I think the injuries is, kind of an excuse, right? But on top of the injuries, you already were starting out with a weaker personnel in your fourth season as a defensive coordinator. So it's like, how much success can you really expect from someone in that situation? I think I would expect a drop off, right? So, and you're seeing it here in the numbers pretty much across the board, except for maybe yards per game given up. Third down has remained the same. But aside from everything else, like it's all kind of dropped off. But I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that you had a lot of new guys. A lot of new guys weren't even ready to play together from week one on. Like I think, was it last week or the week prior? It might have been in the Bears game where all of the free agent additions, Leonard Floyd, Yetur Gross-Matos, Jordan Elliott, all played in the same game together. Like, so what can you expect from this defense when the guys you brought in to apparently help your situation or patch some things up weren't even playing together all season?
And there's another sort of layer to this too. And I want to ask your opinion on this, Steph. What is 2025? Is 2025 a rebuilding year? Is 2025 a Super Bowl year? What are your expectations for the season? Yeah. Because before you decide on Nick Sorensen or any of these players, you have to decide, like, where is this team? If you're still of the mindset that, hey, this is a Super Bowl year in 2025, we're right there, we've got veteran guys, like we got to go back and get it. Well, then it's like, do you want to hire another new defensive coordinator and have guys have to learn another thing and have to spend half the season gelling? Or do you want to say, hey, look, we think it's going to be better with Sorensen. We'll think we'll be healthier and we'll take a run at this thing. Like, you've got to decide what you're doing next year in terms of where this team is in their championship team building cycle. And I don't know the answer to that.
That's actually a really great point. And I don't know if the 49ers even know the answer to that, right? Like, I do know for sure you have to have smaller expectations for 2025 than you had for 2024, right? I think we can expect that there's going to be a lot of changes across the board. I think last offseason was the season of big changes for the defense. And so we saw that drop off. And I think 2025 is going to be that offseason where we see the big changes for the offense, so that we can maybe expect a little bit more of a drop off, unfortunately, maybe next year, right? But I would expect the defense to maybe be a little bit better. As far as the team goals and like team outlook, it's hard to say. I think the priority needs to just be getting back into the playoffs and being a playoff team again, because you aren't going to be that this year. So at the very least, I think that's what you got to look forward to in 2025 and kind of make decisions around doing that again.
Yeah, and the easiest path to getting back to the playoffs always starts with your division, right? You handle your division more than likely, unless you're really bad the rest of the games, you're going to make the playoffs. 49ers absolutely have not handled their division this year. They've won only one game against Seattle. They've lost every other game, most of them in depressing, debilitating fashion. So that's what you got to ask yourself. Is this team going to be good enough next year to be able to beat the Rams twice, to be able to beat the Cardinals twice, to be able to beat Seattle multiple times? And if you can't definitively answer yes, then I think you kind of know what 2025 is. And by the way, those other teams are going to get better next year, or at least they're going to try. It's not like they're going to stay the same. So you got to ask yourself, are we going to be good enough to compete with those teams in our division first and foremost? And if you're not sure, that's a scary thing.
It definitely is scary. I will say, like, I do agree with Nick Bosa in the sense that I think the 49ers do have some pieces on defense to, be a good defense going forward. Again, I think like the last two performances from this defense kind of shows what they could be when, most of that defensive line is healthy. And you have guys like Nick Bosa back. You have guys like Drake Greenlaw back. Like even just Greenlaw coming back in the one game, in one half of football, you saw how that was able to kind of transform what this defense looked like. And so kind of pivoting to Drake Greenlaw now, I think for all of us, it's obvious to think Greenlaw needs to be a priority to get extended this offseason, or maybe even before that, if possible. But one thing that I was a little nervous about, Rob, is the fact that when Greenlaw spoke to the media this week, he kind of left the door open to test free agency. And I know you have the audio up for that, so let's hear it.
This is Drake Greenlaw on KNBR.
At the end of the day, I'm probably going to be a free agent regardless, so I'm not trying to rush the process of being a free agent. I got 3 games left to enjoy with Fred and Bosa and Purdy and all those guys, so when that time comes, I can't stop it. I can't do nothing about it. All I can do is just enjoy these 3 games.
I love Dre.
I mean, we all do. I think he's a huge part of not just this team, but the identity of this team and this defense. Like what you want in your locker room is what Drake Greenlaw brings. And so I think it's him saying that, I think is an indication that there maybe haven't been any extension talks with the 49ers up to this point, at least any that would lead him to think that he's not going to be a free agent. I don't know if he's just saying that to put some pressure on the 49ers to make something happen. Maybe the 49ers wanted to see what he looked like on the field before making any of those decisions. But after seeing him play, and I know it was just a half of football, but after seeing that, I'm like, man, like, get this man locked in, because I want him to be a Niner, and going forward, he needs to be one of those pieces that stays and is a foundational piece of this defense.
If he's healthy, that's the question, though. He took himself out of the game last week. He wasn't healthy. He says he thinks he's going to be ready to go this week. I mean, we'll see. He's got to really prove, I think, in these last few games that he can be healthy. Does he want to go anywhere else? I have no idea. Remember, the 49ers, Drake Greenlaw was like the only guy and I guess Lenore too, but Greenlaw was the first guy where all of a sudden it was like, wait, what? They have a new contract with Drake Greenlaw? The Niners signed Drake Greenlaw.
Yeah.
And he signed for like nothing. It was like unbelievable. It was just done. And we were like, this is amazing. Maybe if the Niners see these last 3 games play out and he looks good, then they can sort of bang out another contract like that with him. Does he really want to go anywhere else? I don't think he does, but I'm sure his agent's going to say to him, look, Dre, this might be the last contract you ever sign in the NFL. So you really, if you want to maximize your dollars here, you can't be taking a hometown discount to stay with your boys in San Francisco. So that's gonna be one of the storylines to pay attention to down the stretch.
And that's kind of my fear, because I do think that if he gets to free agency, there is going to be another team more than willing to offer him more than what the 49ers are probably going to, especially where the 49ers are at with their cap. And currently, I think they're still over the 2025 cap. So they have to be smart with their money going forward. And yeah, if it gets to free agency where all these teams can negotiate with Dre, I think he's probably gone. I mean, there's a lot of former 49er front office guys out there who would, like I said, would be more than happy to bring Greenlaw in. So yeah, hopefully the 49ers can work something out, but definitely that's something to monitor within these last few weeks of the season and, before the start of the new league year. But hopefully Greenlaw's part of the 49ers picture.
I hope so. I love him. I hope he's healthy. But yeah, I mean, I'm sure the Commanders would love to add a Dre Greenlaw to their defense. Who knows if D'Amico Ryans wants to add Dre Greenlaw to his defense? Obviously, I'm sure that would be a big draw for Dre to go play for D'Amico Ryans again. So yeah, there's going to be landing spots. It just depends on what Dre wants to do and where he wants to be.
Yeah, way more threats out there for the 49ers of free agents wanting to go there instead of staying in San Francisco. Now, Rob, there's been a lot of talk about, of course, Brock Purdy. As of late, the discourse has gotten really loud. It's gotten annoying very fast. And I just wanted to share this clip from Richard Sherman, because as always, Richard Sherman adds some good context to these conversations, some good takes in my opinion. So here's what Richard Sherman had to say about Purdy.
What does Brock Purdy deserve? They did a poll in the Bay Area. 38% say he deserves 20 to 30 million. 29% say he deserves between 31 and 40 million. I hear you. I'm with you. But this is the National Football League. You guys are speaking like fans, and businesses don't quite work that way. I'm sure, you're not happy with his performance right now, but I can name 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 quarterbacks making over 50 million that haven't come close to winning anything. And this guy's been to an NFC championship and a Super Bowl. He's played incredibly well in the postseason. I mean, you could talk about Dak Prescott and his playoff woes. You could talk about Jordan Love and his playoff woes. So when you're negotiating with a team, unless you're willing to move on from Brock Purdy, they're going to be paying him 50 plus million. Brock Purdy's going to get his money. I think he's done a great job over the majority of his career. You can say what you want about it, but that's how the National Football League goes, ladies and gentlemen. I'm sorry.
Again, I think he made a really great point there, just about it. It's not so much about what he should be getting paid based on our opinion and what other it's the market. It's the market. The market dictates everything, and the market dictates what Brock Purdy is going to ask for and what's really fair to ask for, right? I mean, it's all fair to ask for 60 million when you see other quarterbacks like Trevor Lawrence getting something like that, when you see Jared Goff's deal, so that's going to dictate everything. So I agree. I think a lot of people are getting really, really mixed in the numbers and just forgetting that at the end of the day, it all comes down to what the market is.
Exactly. It's not just about your skill level. It's not. Look at the Kirk Cousins contract when he's gotten paid. It's about when you hit the market, and it's about what other guys have gotten paid and what the market rate is. That's why all the people that are sitting there saying that they want Brock Purdy to sign for $40 million a year, that's never going to happen. It's just not ever going to happen. And you have to understand how the process works. There's a reason Trevor Lawrence got that money. There's a reason Dak Prescott got that money. It's when are you up and how much leverage do you have when you are up? So if you want Brock back, that's fine. Just know it's going to cost X dollars and you got to be willing to pay it. Otherwise, you're not getting him back. That's just the end of the story.
Yeah. And obviously, I do think that these remaining 3 games, I think, will get the ballpark a little more dialed in for Brock. I said it on Bully Ball, right? Like Tom Pelissero coming out with that report saying that Brock wants top of the market money in his deal. I'm not surprised by that. I'm not surprised by the agent, like assuming that the agent is what fed Tom Pelissero that information. That's not surprising. But Rob, I was a little surprised by that coming out after a game like the one he had, like the one this offense had last week against the Rams. Like at least like put a report out like that after he has a really good game or something.
Bears game? Yeah, like where was that after the Bear, like the 325 against Chicago, right?
Yeah, we'd have been like, okay, yeah, like that makes sense. Sure.
It's all negotiating. That's all it is. It's posturing. He came out with his. Greg Papa came out and basically was like, Brock's a point guard. He's not getting 50 million. That's the push. Like, that's how you start the negotiations, right? You ask for some crazy thing you think they'll never say yes to, just in case they do. The other side responds with a low ball offer that just in case, and then they gradually work their way up and they'll find their way to a compromise. But yeah, that was my first thought when the Pelissero news dropped was, all right, we've started the talks already. And that's where they are, which is a good sign, Steph. It's a good sign because even though I disagree with a lot of Niner fans, I wouldn't pay Brock Purdy what it's going to cost to re-sign him. Whatever the 49ers decide to do, it has to be done by the new league year. They have to know if we're not going to pay him, we're deciding by then, because you can't have this cloud hanging over you with your quarterback and holding out and all that stuff. No, admit to yourself if you're going to pay him, admit what it's going to cost if you want to, and do it. Or draw the line in the sand and say no and move on. But you cannot be in this purgatory. You cannot be in limbo here with your quarterback.
Purgatory? Is that what we would call it? But Rob, I agree with you, but I think like the 49ers have already made that decision, which I think like probably ups the ante even more. Like if you've already made this decision, you want to pay Brock, what is there to wait for, right? So I agree. I think these conversations happening already now in December, albeit like through the media and headlines and things like that indirectly, that's fine. But if that gets the ball rolling, that's good. That's positive, because I think we want this to happen early in this offseason. There's no reason why, especially when we're talking about a quarterback here, leader of your team. You need this guy at every step of the offseason, OTAs and all that. Like all these questions need to be answered as early in the offseason as possible, and preferably even before the draft, I'd say. Before the draft,
before the Super Bowl, Steph, he is eligible. He is eligible to sign a new deal the second the regular season is over. He doesn't have to wait through the playoffs. So if you're the 49ers and you've decided we are paying him, there's no reason to mess around, because, by the way, Josh Allen's already talking about renegotiating his deal. And guess what? When Josh Allen renegotiates his deal, the floor for whatever you were going to pay Brock Purdy goes up. So the Niners have every incentive, if they've decided to pay him, and I agree with you, I think they have, do it immediately. Do it right after the regular season is over. Announce it. You could announce it media week of the Super Bowl, right? It'd be great news for the 49ers. We've locked it up. There's probably going to be some 49ers on Radio Row the week of the Super Bowl, I would imagine, instead of idiots like me sitting down with players and saying, hey, should the 49ers sign Brock Purdy? Then it's, hey, the Niners just signed Brock Purdy. What's it like playing with him? And they can give the schmoozy little puff peef answer about how great Brock Purdy is, and everybody's happy and everybody moves on. So there's no reason to wait if you're the Niners.
Rob, are you trying to manifest your Super Bowl week and how you're going to be happy about something the 49ers did on Super Bowl week?
Well, the only positive for me for that week now that they're out of the playoffs is there might be some Niners players down there. So I might get the chance to interview some Niners players. And let me tell you, I've got some questions for those guys.
Oh, I'm sure you do. I mean, I would love to hear what questions you have, some of those guys. But yeah, I agree. I think that would be a good time to do it. Anytime before the draft, like I said, February, if you want to have a really early deadline, that's not a bad one to have. But Rob, like this just came through before or after, a little bit after we stopped talking about the Greenlaw stuff. Let me just put it up on the screen here. So Shanahan, speaking with the media, I guess, was asked about Dre Greenlaw and Hufunga and bringing those guys back, Kyle Shanahan said, quote, hopefully we do everything we can to keep them here, end quote. And again, as we were saying, with Greenlaw's comments, I think like he's looking towards free agency or is not expecting anything with the 49ers. That to me shows me, hey, we got to get something going. These two have suddenly become a priority, just like the leadership and the energy that they've shown in the short time that they've been back with this defense. It did a lot to, I think, transform the look and the confidence of that defense.
And again, it goes back to what is 2025? If you bring Greenlaw and Hufunga back, 2025 is not looking like a rebuilding year. It's looking like a, hey, we're still trying to go for this thing type of year, right? I mean, not that those guys are obviously young, but you know what I'm saying? Like they represent sort of the old era 49ers, Kyle Shanahan version 1.0 49ers. So if you bring both of them back, I think that's a strong indication of what the team is thinking. And you're right, the defense it has looked better with both of them. It's unquestionable it's looked better with both of them. So yeah, we're learning that like Talanoa Hufunga, better at safety than Jair Brown, better than Deshaun Gibson.
Who would have thought?
Right?
Who would have thought?
Imagine that. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see what they do. I don't know what Hufanga's market is going to be. There's like no safety market out there. There's like all pro safeties that hit free agency every year. Nobody friggin' wants. So who the hell knows? You may be able to get him cheap.
And I think so, right? Like coming off an injury, I think like early in the season, he was somewhat struggling, but I think he was kind of just trying to get his footing up under him after being out from his injury. So yeah, I think you could probably get him back on a pretty decent deal. And again, like I think getting it done before these players reach free agency, before these players start talking and thinking about other teams, like you got to swoop in there and bring these guys back. So I'm liking that. I'm liking that from Shanahan. Hopefully the 49ers get something done. It's really a no-brainer. But you know, Rob, you know, the 49ers have another game coming up. Unfortunately, we got to watch 3 more games from this team. But the good news is they're playing a team that's, you know, kind of struggling just as much as they are this season. So let's take it back to way back Wednesday here. The Dolphins, 49ers, they've played each other 15 times, including 1 Super Bowl, with the Miami Dolphins winning 8 games and the 49ers winning 7 games in their all-time matchup. But I think you know where I might be going with this, Rob. Like,
oh, I know.
How can I not talk about the Super Bowl when talking about these two teams and, you know, the limited number of games they've played throughout the years? Like, of course, this is the biggest one. You got Joe Montana, you got Dan Marino, 2 iconic quarterbacks. This was the first Super Bowl in which both quarterbacks threw for more than 300 yards. I mean, I think that tells you, like, it's just a different time, right? Different time for quarterbacks. You got everyone with crazy arms now these days, but 851 total yards of offense combined that day. So it was an electric one. Despite the score, obviously, if you're a 49er fan, it was an electric one. 49ers were actually down to start in the first quarter, but the points exploded. They outscored the Dolphins 21-6 in the second quarter alone, and the Dolphins would not score another point after that. Rob, what do you remember about this one?
Well, first of all, I was born in January of 1985, so, you know, I was 9 days old.
Super Bowl baby.
I was 9 days old when this game was played.
Awesome.
The 49ers defense doesn't get enough credit. This was not just playing against Dan Marino. This was Dan Marino after his best season ever. This is Dan Marino after he threw for 5,000 yards and 48 touchdown passes in 1984. And the 49ers came in and shut them down. The defense doesn't get enough love. All 4 members of the 49ers secondary made the Pro Bowl that year, which is insane to think about. And it is exactly what you needed when you're going up against the pass-happy Miami Dolphins and Dan Marino. You know, this isn't like beating, you know, some nondescript like Jake Delhomme's Panthers in the Super Bowl. No disrespect to Tom Brady. This is Dan Marino and the Miami friggin' Dolphins with Don Shula as the head coach. And San Francisco whooped them and took them down. And it was like, okay, this Joe Montana guy, you know, he might be pretty good.
And the fact that, like, this Dan Marino offense couldn't even score after the half. Like you said, I think the defense deserves some credit in that matchup for sure, despite Joe Montana being the MVP of that game. But yeah, definitely a good tidbit of 49ers history looking back at one of the 49ers Super Bowls against this team. Now, as I mentioned, Rob, there's limited history between these two teams. Yeah, of course. I have to bring this one up too, right? Like the day that we found out what Brock Purdy was. And this was the last time the 49ers played the Dolphins. And it was the first time that Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDonald played each other head to head as head coaches. And yeah, like Brock Purdy's first significant action after coming in for an injured Jimmy Garoppolo. He finished the game 25 of 37, 210 yards, 2 touchdowns, a pick. I thought this was kind of funny, but also like very, very reflective of 2022 and just the time with Christian McCaffrey. He was the team's leading rusher and receiver in that game. And the 49ers went on to win that one 33-17. And Rob, I was there. I actually made it onto the like TV broadcast. That was me with my brother in the middle there. Kind of cool. But I think it was just cooler to just see Brock and be excited. I remember being really discouraged when Jimmy went down and thinking, oh God, like that's the game, because, the Dolphins were a pretty good team at that time. But yeah, so I was excited to see that. And I think it's a cool moment to say, like, you were there.
Say this out loud. Brock Purdy comes in, rookie quarterback, last pick in the draft, third string, and he throws 37 passes in the game.
Yeah.
Like, screw it, man. We're letting it rip. And I just went back and watched that game because I have that kind of time. It was a lot of short check down passes. There were some deeper throws from Brock, but it was back foot, ball out, back foot, ball. It was fast, quick, and in a hurry.
Blitzing him a ton, I think, if I recall correctly.
Yeah, because they were blitzing the hell out of him because they were like, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. And he beat it. Like, they had the answers built in that day. There were no complaints about the protection scheme and the Shanahan blitz answers on that day. He came in, and I always give Brock credit for this. If you go back and watch too, he throws a touchdown, his first touchdown to Kyle Juszczyk. It's just a ball in the flat. It's a nothing, like you and I could make the throw. But Brock afterwards celebrates like, I'm the man. I made the biggest throw, because he recognized in that moment he had to send the message to the rest of the guys in that locker room. The season's not over. I can do this. Believe in me. Like, we can still go get this thing. And he recognized that from the jump. And I think that's part of the reason why these guys believe in him so much now, is because from the second he got in there, he was like, I'm good enough. I don't care that I'm the last pick in the draft. Let's go. And then he went out and proved it. And they were like, damn, we like this guy.
I think we all had that same feeling watching it, right? There was just a different command from Brock in this game that it was hard to ignore and hard not to trust right off the bat. So it was it's pretty incredible, and hopefully, playing Miami again, we get a similar type of confidence and swag from Brock in this one too. As I mentioned, there's a lot of differences going into this matchup than last time. This time the game will be played in Miami. At least it's going to be good weather. I mean, yeah, that's no rain. These two teams last time were 8-4. This time both teams are 6-8 going into it, with playoff hopes obviously in the rearview mirror. And with some 49er players being disgruntled this season, you got also Tyreek Hill in Miami that also looks disgruntled. He fired off a couple tweets this morning. One of them said, it's time for me to go, coach. And I don't know if there should be a comma there, because, sometimes, people leave out essential commas. I don't know if it's time for me to go, coach, like let's freaking go type, or if it's time for me to go, coach football somewhere else. So like that could mean a lot of things, but he also followed it up by saying, I might get my first gray hair this year. So you read into that what you will. Let's just say Tyreek Hill is fed up in Miami.
Hey, you know what? You can go join Michael Vick's coaching staff, right? He just became a head coach. Get your experience, Tyreek. We don't need you to play this week. We got enough problems in San Francisco.
Well, I guess like this is kind of the sign of the times for both teams, right? And I actually saw this tweet posted by Field Yates this morning. Tyreek Hill's last catch over 30 yards was in week 1. Like, it's crazy because I think for the last couple of seasons, like we've known Hill to be this big play guy. Chuck it up, throw it to him, deep balls. He's going to get it. He's speedster, yards after the catch as well. And like, for that stat is a little mind blowing to me. And I know Tua's been hurt or, missed a number of games this season. I think that obviously hurt this Dolphins team. In fact, they were looking good and better since he had come back, except last week. Like it was a disappointing loss for them. So I kind of feel like these two teams are in very similar boats going into this game. Injuries as well, like Jaden Waddle's status, their wide receiver 2, his status is up in the air. So like, Rob, who do you think is more defeated going into this matchup? Like, is it the Dolphins or the 49ers? Is it Mike McDaniel or Kyle Shanahan? Like this is going to be a game of like will, like who can get up to play this game better?
Well, I think that Mike McDaniel is going to be up for this game because I think he used the word exploited at one point, talking about his time in San Francisco with Kyle Shanahan on the Play Callers podcast, I believe, that The Athletic put out last year. He wants to beat Kyle. He feels like he was a secret for too long in San Francisco. He didn't get enough credit for what he did there and what he contributed to the offenses that they had. I know Mike McDaniel wants to beat his old boss in Kyle Shanahan. So I'm sure he's going to be up for this game. Remember, last time they played, the first play of the game was a 75-yard touchdown pass by the Dolphins. Like, he wants to come out and embarrass them. So I think you're going to get a strong effort from the Dolphins this week. Who knows what you're going to get from the 49ers? Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, like, I think both teams, like Kyle Shanahan loves to play, I think, against his former proteges. And,
Agreed.
This time against McVay hasn't gone so well, but there's probably still this sense of like, you're my son kind of thing to to Mike McDaniel that I think like I just can't ignore in this matchup. Like I do think also Kyle is going to be a little extra motivated to get some things. And who knows, maybe this is the game, and I could just be projecting my own hopes here. Maybe this is the game where we see Ricky Pearsall and we see Jacob Cowan get a little more action. Kyle Shanahan using some speed on his offense, right? And I say Pearsall too because he played in Florida, so it'd be nice to get him some action just like he did against the Bucks. So I don't know. I think they're both going to be motivated in their own right to perform and have some crazy play calls and have bragging rights for this game. If nothing else, if you're not going to make the playoffs, like let's at least win this one so the group chat can go on fire.
I would like to see it. I mean, God, I don't want to be miserable the last 3 weeks, and I'm in a better mood when the team wins. I know they're out of the playoffs, but like, oh, the draft pick, man, whatever. This team has blown draft picks. They've blown the 3rd overall pick. They had the 2nd overall pick that they traded down to get the 3rd overall pick. They blew that one too. They blew another 1st round pick that year. Like, I'm not worried about what the actual number is of the draft pick. I'm much more worried about seeing my team perform well. Isaac Rendo is not practicing today. He's got a hamstring injury. That dude, man, the second you give him the ball, he gets hurt. Like, it's going to be the Izzy Abanikanda game this week.
Oh my God. Yeah, the 49ers really scraping the bottom of the barrel with all these injuries. So, yeah, as you mentioned, Isaac Rendo now with the hamstring injury, he was already dealing with the foot sprain, right? He played through that on Thursday's game. I don't think he really looked to 100%, Rob, in that game. But I also don't think the run blocking was very good in that one either. But now hamstring injury too, so he won't practice. And we also got word that Trent Williams is not going to practice today as well. and he may not play again this year, according to Kyle Shanahan. So just something to keep an eye on. I don't think that's surprising to really anyone. And I think considering, the age of Trent Williams, where the season is at, I don't mind that decision. I have been thinking that for the players who have been hurt already this season, I support shutting some of those guys down. Trent Williams would definitely be one of those players, Robin. Jalen Moore, who had been filling in for Trent, I think pretty admirably, ended up getting hurt in that game against the Rams. So the 49ers did sign an offensive tackle to their practice squad just in case, because they're really thin at tackle right now, especially for that left side with a few injuries. So Jalen Moore is going to be limited. I think that's a good sign on a Wednesday, and hopefully he can play Sunday, but something, we got to monitor. A couple other guys who are limited today as well. Nick Bosa, Dre Greenlaw, Jalen Moore, Malik Mustafa, and Nick Zakelj, who is under the weather.
Is Nick Zakelj a real player? Like, when are we ever going to see this guy? Does he actually exist, or is he just like a made-up thing that the 49ers acquired?
He's like a designer player or something, like.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like, they don't have the real license to put whoever's nag. Like, what the hell with Nick Zakelj? How many years are we going to go by without ever seeing this guy?
Oh, my God. Here's my thing with the 49ers, approach to drafting offensive linemen. I think it works, but the development plan takes so long. I think it wouldn't surprise me if Nick Zakelj becomes a starter at some point next season. And we're like, oh, see,
great.
After 3 years. So
people become doctors faster than 49ers offensive linemen make the friggin' starting lineup. Like, what are we doing here? Oh, just a shade under half a decade. Congratulations.
So yeah, so that's the tough part. It's I understand why they probably feel that, their offensive line plan is sound, but it does take quite a bit. So maybe we'll see Nick Zakelj at some point before the season ends. There's been a lot of injuries on the offensive line. So who knows? You just never know these next couple of games what could happen. Just another piece of news before we get on out of here. The 49ers finally waived Ambry Thomas, and it feels like Ambry was a little disgruntled on IR, and maybe he asked for his release at some point. He did fire off a tweet some time ago saying he was collecting dust since week 8. So that kind of hints that he had been healthy since then, but the 49ers kept him on injured reserve, now waived. We'll see if he signs with another team. I could think of a few who could probably use his services going into the playoffs. So we'll see. But I think a lot of 49er fans would be happy that they finally moved on from Ambry.
Yeah, nobody was really upset. You were collecting dust, so we were all totally fine with it.
It would be kind of funny if he ended up, having some good contributions on another team, in the playoffs. Look at Samuel Womack in Indianapolis, right? Sometimes players just need a different environment.
Good luck. I mean, I'm certainly not against him. That's fine. No, I mean that seriously. I obviously good luck. It wasn't working here in San Francisco. We had tried that too many times.
Yeah.
It was not happening. Move on.
All right. And before we get out of here, I do have the results of our poll. Should Nick Sorensen be the 49ers defensive coordinator in 2025? 46% of you said yes. 31% of you said no under any circumstance. And 23% of you said no, but only if Robert Saleh returns. So there you have it. A lot of you guys feel like you wouldn't mind having Nick Sorensen back for another season. We'll see what the 49ers decide. We'll see what this defense and this offense looks like on Sunday. But for now, I mean, that's our show for today. Rob, thank you for joining me on a Wednesday. Appreciate you. Always love to have you on. For everyone that tuned in, make sure you like this video. Make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet. not just Gold Standard Network, but mine as well. Not just mine, Steph 49K, but Gold Standard Network as well. Audio listeners, leave a rating, leave a review. But for now, folks, have a good rest of your Wednesday. Peace.